To start with, I've got some Japanese water stones here. I bought these from Knife Planet, but these are the grits that I use. These stones are dry, so to start with, I'm gonna drop them in some warm water, and they're gonna bubble. The higher grit one's a tad more porous usually. Yeah, you can see the bubbles are coming out. So that's just air, water's pushing into the stone. So here's the concept of sharpening your knife. The standard type of dull, which will be one with feathers. Probably this knife here is actually really bad. So this is the one that's going to get the grinder, but let me use this as a reference so you can see that what we're looking at here, here's the heel of the knife. So that's what we're looking at right here, the heel. So if we were looking at down at like this is what we're going to see on a standard knife that's dull. It's going to have a series of feathers. It's going to be like randomly alternating saw teeth that are curled over. So the first step in sharpening is to use probably a very coarse grit or a medium coarse grit and try to develop a burr. And a burr is to take all these feathers over here and get all the feathers to face in the same direction as best as we can. And you'll be able to feel this when you run your thumb up it. On this side of the burr, it'll feel smooth, but on the side it curls towards, it'll catch just a tad. After you've established the burr, the next step is to flip it to the other side. So you'll use the same grit and you'll flip the burr to the other side, and this will further align it and start to eliminate the randomness in the feathers. So you're working your way towards uniformity. Once you flip the burr, you move up in grit. And then we start over again. We establish the burr, which is actually going to flip it back to the other side. Because when we move up a grit, the burr is here. We're going to flip it, and then flip it back, and then move up a grit. And all this is doing is creating a more and more fine burr that's getting closer and closer to a very sharp edge. Once we've hit the maximum grit that we're going to use, we'll establish the burr, and then instead of flipping it again, we remove it. We try to hone it down and remove it gently until it's gone and we have a nice edge. Here's some of the other things that I use while I'm sharpening my knives. I have a towel. I'm working with water stones, so things get wet up here. My water stones have a base that they sit in here, so that's on the board. I have some phone book paper. So I get this phone book I don't ever freaking use, so I keep them around with my knife sharpening stuff so I can test before and after sharpnesses. It's a pretty decent paper to work with. I don't use these anymore. I don't need to, but when I first started, this was really helpful for me. I use Sharpie markers to mark the edges of my blade. So that's a big thing in sharpening, is how do you know if you're hitting the right angle? It turns out the knife will tell you what the angle is, but you've got to learn to feel it and listen to it. In the beginning, visual feedback helps. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a black line down the side of the blade, down by the edge, and right near the edge, as we sharpen, we're looking to remove just a small hair or two off that edge and no more. If you start taking off more, you're going to be scuffing up the face of the blade. So it'll also tell you if your pressure throughout the stroke down the stone is even, or if you're dipping or rocking as well. So it's pretty good feedback for the first few times that you do it to put some Sharpie marker. Let's mark it up so we can learn about how to take off the edge. I like to use these big fat Sharpies. I'm gonna make sure that I put black not only all the way down to the edge, so that one is going down to the edge, but it's not coming up the face of the blade. I want to make sure I come up the face of the blade a tad, so I know if I'm removing too much, if my angle is bad, right? I don't want to. I did not learn this when I made my mistakes. I learned this after I made my mistakes and scratched up my knives. So I'm trying to save you guys scratching up your knives. How about that? Do it to both sides. I made a little mistake. I went up a little bit too high. Who cares? That's gonna come off when I wash it. Okay. These knives were factory sharpened to a certain degree. I'm not looking to change that. So what I'm gonna try to do is find that angle by removing just the edge of this black. I will find that angle. While that's happening, I need to pay attention to like what that feels like, what that angle feels like in my hand, what it sounds like, what it looks like. And after a while, I won't need to do that to find the angle of the blade. I'll just know what it feels like. I sharpen based on feel and sound. I use my eyes, but my eyes are to keep my fingers safe. I'm paying attention to my fingers and making sure they're putting pressure in the right spot and that they're not going to get cut.